Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Difficult Conversations, Talking with Your Loved One About Aged Care. I'm Janine Grossman, Director of Professional Services. Before we commence, I'd like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, of elders past and present, on which this meeting takes place. I would also like to acknowledge that Montefiore community has been shocked and deeply saddened by the tragic events occurring in Israel over the past months. We know that many residents, families, and staff have loved ones in Israel, and our hearts and thoughts are with them all and with the broader Jewish community. We stand with Israel and hope to see a swift end to this senseless suffering. We are thrilled that we have over 80 people registered for tonight's event. The Montefiore Spotlight Series discusses perspectives on aging and addresses the issues that affect older members of the community and their loved ones. Each session will explore an aspect of the aging experience, including health and wellness, research and innovation, making the right choices in aged care, and supporting older family and community members. You'll have the opportunity to hear from visiting experts and our own Montefiore professionals in clinical and allied health care. This evening, we welcome Melissa Levi, clinical psychologist and author, as our guest. Over a decade ago, Melissa embarked on her career as a clinical psychologist, specializing in the older people's mental health and dementia. She is committed to educating and empowering families to better understand aging, have the big conversations, and plan for the future so they can take control of their aging journeys. Her mission inspired her newly released book, We Need to Talk About Aging, and her website, Talking Aging, resources she wishes had been available for her own family when her grandfather was diagnosed with dementia. Melissa has come to know that while every family story is unique, we all share the same fears and questions about aging. Her promise is that together we'll solve problems, you'll have more clarity for today, and you'll understand the options and next steps for tomorrow. We also welcome Shelley Wold, Social Work Manager at Montefiore, and Amanda Ghanaian, General Manager, Help at Home by Montefiore. Shelley joined Montefiore in May 2019 as a social worker for our Special Care Unit and Monte Terrace in Randwick. She has also worked in the admissions team, where she assessed and supported new residents and their families coming to Montefiore. Shelley now holds the role of Social Work Manager, where she oversees 15 of our social workers who work across all our care units, as well as designing and implementing innovative programs for our residents and families. Amanda leads the team at Help at Home by Montefiore in her capacity as General Manager and is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the business. Amanda's direct reports include the hard-working team of frontline workers, along with the head office staff, care coordinator, and allied health teams. Amanda leads the Help at Home team to provide the best care to our clients so that they remain at home independently for as long as possible. Tonight, we will be discussing future planning and best practice set your family up for success, navigating challenging conversations about next steps, the start of the aged care journey, including respite options and temporary funding, care after a crisis, and creating family alignment and respecting your loved one's wishes. Before we start our conversation, I just wanted to share my personal experience with my parents. They were living independently in their unit, and although I had all the knowledge of how we should plan for the aging process, all I did was have an enduring power of attorney and enduring guardianship in place. I always hoped that as long as they had each other, everything would be okay. Well, that wasn't a good plan, was it? Because everything changed overnight. My beloved mum had a stroke and was in hospital for 2 weeks, while my beautiful dad couldn't manage on his own as he had a degenerative neuromuscular disease. Then 2 weeks after my mum returned from hospital, still having a long way to go to rehabilitate from her stroke, my dad was diagnosed with a terminal inoperable brain tumor. So, home care, residential care, palliative care, grief was what we were suddenly having to navigate overnight. I found it totally overwhelming, even though I was in the industry. I had the knowledge, but the fear of thinking about it crippled me into not having a plan. Hopefully tonight will assist you all not to have the same plan as I did. We will now head into our discussion with our panel. I ask that you please use the chat function in Zoom to ask any questions, which we will answer at the end. Melissa, congratulations on your new book, We Need to Talk About Aging. What a great way to start tonight's conversation. You talk about replacing fear and uncertainty with knowledge, understanding, and practical strategies. Can you share your thoughts on what is the best way to set you and your family up for success along the aging journey? How do we approach your loved one about their wishes?
Janine, I wanted to say thank you for being so vulnerable and for sharing your story here with us tonight. I think your family is the norm. I spent over 10 years working at St. Vincent's Hospital, and the number of times I saw families having these really big, difficult conversations in emergency departments or hospital corridors. And as you say, it doesn't have to be that way, but often it requires a certain level of education and support, to take a different path, I suppose. In thinking about what successful aging might look like for a family, I tend to think of my husband's family. So his grandfather, who we called Pa, had a number of medical conditions, and he was really open and honest in talking with his family and his doctors about his wishes and values and priorities for his care, what mattered to him. He was also very cheeky in dictating, what sort of nurse he hoped would be looking after him later in life. But what I got to see was that when the time came that his medical condition really deteriorated quite rapidly, his family, and it was a big family, 6 children, so, often there's the potential for differences of opinion and conflict. They were all really in alignment. They had clarity. They had confidence in making some complex decisions. And Pa's care until he died was as consistent with his wishes as possible. And after his passing, I got to see how, despite the tremendous loss and the grief, in knowing what he wanted afforded the family so much resilience in their grief, because there was no second guessing. They all knew hand on heart that they had done the best they could. And I've seen this now play out. I've been fortunate to walk this journey with more than 1,000 families now. And I think the families that have a better time in navigating the aging journey tend to do well at what I think of as the care triangle. And that's really, they understand mum, dad, or their aging loved one's wishes really clearly. They, as the carer, have educated themselves around what supports and services are available. They have plans in place. And as a family, they're really clear on everybody's roles and responsibilities, which creates alignment. And I think the key to getting that triangle really strong is to have some big conversations early. The question then becomes how. So for people that are on this call tonight, when you get the follow-up email, I've actually created a resource that has lots of strategies and tips and scripts to get you started, so that as early as tomorrow, you can sit down with the people you love and start to have these big conversations to really shape the journey ahead.
Thank you, Melissa, and I'm sure that those tips will be really useful for the family, so please access that. And Melissa, you talk about the big conversations that we should be having. What tips can you give us on when we notice small changes in our loved ones? And if we're concerned about these, how do you suggest families have a conversation regarding next steps? So for instance, when would it be the right time to introduce a geriatrician as an additional support? Can you also elaborate on what families need to discuss after receiving a diagnosis?
Absolutely. So I think, Janine, firstly, it's very normal for families to be reticent and hesitant to raise concerns with loved ones. You know, we don't want to distress or upset or burden the people we love. So firstly, if you are watching this tonight and you are in that boat, that is so normal. You are not alone. You know, I think of a gentleman that I saw some years ago. He was a professor. And he came to see me because his family had spoken to him that they were concerned that perhaps, you know, there were some changes in his thinking skills. And after we did a big assessment, you know, he saw a number of different medical professionals. We all came together and agreed that sadly this gentleman was presenting with the early signs of Alzheimer's disease, a type of dementia. And I remember feeling sick to my stomach at the thought of giving him this diagnosis of his family, because to him, his intellect and his mind was so much more than, you know, just being able to function every day. It was his identity. It was his most prized asset. And when we gave the diagnosis, he was, you know, of course, shocked and bereaved. And I remember he wept in the session. And so we invited them to come back a short time later to give the family some support and helping them to navigate those next steps. And he came back and he said, you know, this has been such a double-edged sword because, of course, I would never want this diagnosis, but I'm so grateful that I got it early because it gave his family what I think of as the 4 gifts. The first one is the gift of time. He got to reflect on what really mattered to him and how he wanted to spend the coming years of his life. The gift of choice, because he was diagnosed early, he had access to the greatest number of potential treatment and management options. The gift of future planning. So, for example, booking an appointment with a geriatrician, even though that meant maybe a 6-month wait, he had the luxury of being able to wait that time. And also the gift of feeling seen. He said to me, you know, I think on some level I knew that my brain wasn't working the way it used to, and now I can put language to that. And, you know, it doesn't feel made up. I know that it's real and there are things that I can do about it. So at the risk of self-promotion, if families are in the boat where they're struggling, I don't know if you can see that, but where they're struggling with, okay, but now how do I have the conversation? In my book, We Need to Talk About Aging, there's a chapter called Realizing That Something's Not Quite Right. Again, it will give you all the language, the strategies to have those sensitive conversations and raise your concerns with your aging loved one. And in another chapter, which is all about receiving a diagnosis, it goes through precisely step by step, you know, what families can do after receiving a difficult diagnosis.
Thank you, Melissa. That's really useful information. I know recently I was at a conference and all the recipients in the conference who were actually people living with dementia said that the biggest gap after getting the diagnosis was getting information from their geriatrician, GP, or any other specialist. So having a resource like your book to give people tips can be really useful, as well as knowing, you know, when you receive information straight away, sometimes you don't process it. So also having a book to refer to along the way, just to remind you what to do, is a really useful resource. So going back to having those big conversations with the family and with your loved ones, and sometimes when they're big families and not everybody agrees. Shelley, as a social worker, can you share your tips on how to create family alignment? What happens when everyone doesn't agree on the next steps? And what are the big conversations families should be having then?
Sure, thanks, Janine. I really wanted to reiterate what Melissa's just spoken about. So the importance of having those really early conversations. My recommendations would be getting together as a family unit to have those face-to-face conversations, really empowering your loved one to share their wishes and feelings around their care now and into the future, what they want for themselves, keeping your loved one's wishes at the center of any decisions that are being made, and identifying what supports are needed and who can assist with what. So in a perfect world, everybody's in agreement. What happens when we can't reach agreement and we can't move forward? There are services out there that really specialize in mediation and care coordination. They can often be really helpful to come in as an independent voice and to help guide you through the decision-making process. It's also a good idea to reach out to somebody that you might have a relationship with in the community, such as your GP or a geriatrician that you might have seen, a rabbi or a spiritual leader, somebody impartial to be there to help guide that conversation and get you through that decision-making process. Where possible, it's also really important to support and encourage your loved one to prepare an advanced care plan or to write down their end-of-life wishes, to make their preferences known, and if possible, to nominate an enduring guardian or power of attorney, somebody that they feel comfortable with making decisions on their behalf. Thanks.
Thank you, Shelley. That was really useful information too, especially when families don't agree, and just accessing some external services that may help the process and make it smoother. I know personally we accessed our rabbi, and it was a wonderful, wonderful resource to have. I don't know what I would have done with it out at that time. So moving on again, getting back to having big conversations, and then with family alignment or family disagreement. But what about the actual person themselves? So Amanda, can you tell us what you think is the best way to introduce help at home when your loved one is at home and requires care, but they don't want it?
Thanks, Janine, and good evening, everyone. Introducing home care to a loved one who's resistant can be very challenging, but there are several strategies that may help this situation. Open communication. So start by having an open and honest conversation with your loved one about their needs and their concerns, and listening attentively to their fears and the reasons why they don't want that care in the first place. Acknowledging their feelings and showing empathy along the way, I think, goes a long way. Highlight the benefits of what home care can offer. So discuss the benefits, emphasise how it can improve their quality of life, provide necessary assistance, and enable them to remain independent in their home for as long as possible. Involving them in the decision-making, I think, is paramount. So, you know, encourage your loved one to be part of the decision-making process. Ask for their input on the type of care that they would prefer, the days, the times, the types of tasks that they would like and they're comfortable with. Give them a sense of control, and giving them that sense of control can often alleviate any resistance or concerns. We do suggest at Help at Home just to start the services slowly. So, you know, introduce that home support gradually. Begin with a trial period or limited hours to allow your loved one to get comfortable with the idea. Over time, you can always build on those, you know, times and length of service or scope of care as they become more comfortable with that support. We've already talked about the guidance piece, but I think, you know, involving a neutral third party is important. We've often, you know, enlisted current clients, the existing clients with Help at Home to, you know, sit with if they know the family member, and having multiple people advocating for the importance of home care can reinforce the message and make it easier for your loved one to accept that care. And we've seen that before when we've had existing clients, share their stories and how home care has impacted them in such a positive way so that they can stay, in their home with dignity and independence, which is really important. And we had that example, and the carer, the client who took on that advice and decided to give us an opportunity is now with us and really enjoying that support that they get at home. I think demonstrating empathy and patience is also important. So understand that your loved one may feel vulnerable, resistant, or even scared about these changes. So be patient, empathetic, and reassure them throughout the process, and avoid pressuring or making them feel guilty into taking on this care. I think, the benefits of working with someone like Help at Home is also important, because we do offer a dedicated care coordinator who will remain with your loved one for the duration of the Montefiore journey, from assessment right through to potentially moving into the Montefiore residential campus. Thanks, Janine.
Thanks, Amanda. So, as you know, we speak about having a plan and all the things that you've said, the tips about getting somebody, slowly involved in the home care and Help at Home process. But often, as you know, like what happened to us, we had a very unexpected incident. My mother had a stroke. She had to come out of hospital. So, Amanda, can you discuss the Help at Home offering and what families can expect when a loved one is coming out of hospital and they require short-term care? For example, if they've had a stroke or something that was totally unexpected. And
Yes.
Can you share the funding model specifically for this?
Yep, absolutely, Janine. Home care services following a hospital discharge are often tailored to provide short-term care and support to individuals transitioning back to their home. So there's not one size that fits all, unfortunately. The type of care and services offered may vary based on the individual's needs, but some common aspects of short-term home care will include personal care. So that's assistance with daily activities such as bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting, and even transferring, which we call manual handling, so mobility support as well. There could also be a requirement for medication management, so that's ensuring proper medication adherence, managing prescriptions, and monitoring for any adverse reactions. That part would be done by a clinical professional. Also wound care, so if the individual that's being discharged, or your loved one that's being discharged, has got surgical wounds or injuries or other medical conditions requiring specialised care, we can also step in and support your loved one with that upon discharge. There's also a host of rehabilitation services that are on offer, from physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy sessions, and all of these will aid in recovery, improvement in mobility, and regain independence where possible for that person. Also, regular health monitoring, vital sign checks and observations for any signs of complications or health issues are something that we can also support upon discharge. We also offer assistance with meal planning, preparation, and ensuring that there is proper nutrition upon discharge, and to maintain that as well, because that's really important. There's also other options as simple as transportation. So we would offer transport to medical appointments for follow-up post-discharge, or grocery shopping, or even just running essential errands. It really is, as we said, tailored to each individual's needs. Now, regarding the funding model for short-term care after a hospital discharge, there are several options. One option that the hospital may arrange with you is what we call a transition care package. So that's short-term care post-discharge that will be in place for around 12 weeks. Now, that does need to be approved by the ACAT team, which is the Aged Care Assessment Team. They'll come and meet with your loved one in hospital. They will assess your loved one, and they will then have a discussion around what options are available. Now, these services could include nursing, personal care, allied health and community supports. And you can be eligible for a transition care package, or TransPack, as it's called, if you're living in either a residential facility or living in your own home. There's also short-term restorative care, which is another option of care. That is delivered by a team of health professionals, and that will assist your loved one, as soon as they come out of hospital. That, however, you do need to be living in your own home. And if you do already have a home care package, unfortunately, you're not eligible for that. We do have a lot of clients that do, call us on a Friday and say, I've got my loved one coming out, quickly arrange services. So we will do that. Because there's not a lot of time from when you're told you need to discharge. Your time has come where you need to discharge to where you actually have your loved one at home, and we're more than happy to help you with that along the way.
Thanks, Amanda. So as we've heard, there are funding models out there that you can access when this happens. And I think, a lot of us aren't aware of those things and have never heard of those things. So it's just important to remember that if you have an unexpected event and you don't have information and you don't know, pick up the phone and ask us. That's what we're here for. Montefiore is here, whether it's our help at home branch or if it's our residential care branch. We would be able to assist you to answer questions like that, and where you can access support and what kind of funding model you may be eligible for. So, and I also know that, on many occasions when I have any discussions with my friends who've got aging parents, because I'm in that age group now, and people ask, well, what do you do? And I say, well, the first thing you need to do is apply for an ACAT. And they all look at me blankly. What is an ACAT? So, Amanda, can you explain to the audience what is an ACAT firstly, and how
Absolutely.
You can apply for an ACAT and the packages that are offered for people who wish to remain at home? What are the steps we should be taking?
Absolutely. So as I've mentioned before, ACAT stands for Aged Care Assessment Team. That team is responsible for assessing the needs of older individuals. They then determine their eligibility for government-funded aged care services within their home, and also in residential aged care facilities. Now, the steps for ACAT, it's a little bit tricky, but I'll try and walk you through it as best as I can. The first step is to contact My Aged Care, and we're happy to send out the details of the best contact number for My Aged Care after this call. But I would strongly suggest that you be with your loved one when that call is being placed, and you would automatically, when they're taking down your details, request that you become an authorised representative, so that any point thereafter you can call on behalf of your loved one and you won't need them sitting next to you. If you don't do that in your phone and you're not an authorised representative on behalf of your loved one, unfortunately, they won't be able to give you any information. So that's the first thing. So you've engaged with My Aged Care. Now, then they go through an initial screening on the phone. So the person or your family will undergo an initial screening process over the phone, or you can also do it online, to gather basic information about your loved one's situation and the care needs. Then the next step will be requesting for an ACAT assessment. So that's based on the initial screening via phone or via email or online. And if the individual's needs seem to require further assessment, they will refer for a full ACAT assessment. Now, this assessment is usually conducted by a healthcare professional, whether it be a nurse, a social worker, or someone with an allied health background. You may wait a while for this assessment to be given a date for the assessment. So, to Melissa's point earlier in this spotlight series, please don't wait until it's too late. it's easier to have your name on a waiting list than to wait for too long and then it all be too late and it just be too, too much on the family. Now, an assessor from the ACAT team will visit the person's home, or they might even conduct it at either by the phone or in a suitable location, and that will evaluate the care needs. The assessment covers various aspects of your loved one's health, from mobility, general health, personal care, safety, and support requirements. Now, after the assessment, and that can take about an hour and a half, the ACAT team will then determine the individual's eligibility for government-funded aged care services and the level of care they require. So for those of you who don't know, there are 4 levels, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 2 are low care, and then you've got your high care with more complex health needs, level 3 and level 4. Once assessed and approved for services to remain at home, individuals will be allocated a home care package, and these packages offer a range of services tailored to meet the person's needs, from personal care, allied health, nursing, domestic assistance, social support, equipment and home modifications, as well as transport assistance. And that's where we come in, and we can absolutely walk you through all of those steps.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And just picking up, for me, the most important sentence that you said was, make sure that the family member or who the person who's going to be able to be the contact person and be present at these conversations, that you are there. Because from my own experience as well, when I had to have an ACAT for my mother, and at the time they did it over the telephone, and I was in the room listening to the conversation, and I heard the person saying, so are you able to take your own medications? And she said, yes, of course. And how are you with your food and meals? Are you eating okay? Are you getting enough food? Are you managing? And she said, yes, of course. And everything they asked her, she said, yes, of course. But that's because I was doing it all for her, not anyone, not herself. So they got a completely different picture, and from her answers, we wouldn't have got any package, because it sounded like she was completely independent, until they started asking me the questions and explaining, yes, she's fine with her medications because I've packed it into a blister pack and it's all there for her, and I checked that she's taken it. So it's very, very important that we are there to represent our loved one, to make sure that they're giving accurate information. So now that we've got ACAT assessments done, and an ACAT can be for a home care package, it can be for respite care, it can be for residential care. Shelley, can you give us your experience and just some tips on the best way to approach a conversation with your loved one about the need for residential care when the time arises? I know we can all plan, we can all have a plan, but just like I shared in my personal story, my plan wasn't good enough. We all should have a plan B. Can you share the importance of having that plan, Shelley?
Sure, thanks, Janine. So really following on from the conversations that we've had as a family unit and with our loved ones previously, what they may have identified that they wanted for themselves at that time may no longer be viable, it may no longer be meeting their needs. So it's really important to have a plan B. Most people want to stay in their homes for as long as possible, but there may come a time when this isn't viable anymore and their care needs can't safely be met at home. So having clear and honest conversations involving your loved one as much as possible and listening to their thoughts and the concerns that they speak about. I wanted to share a personal experience of a beautiful lady that I supported some years ago in our special care unit. She was living with dementia, and her family were finding it increasingly challenging to meet her care needs at home. Her family felt that she couldn't understand or remember conversations, so they chose not to have open conversations with her about residential care. The first day that she arrived with her family, she was completely overwhelmed, completely disorientated, didn't understand what was happening. Her family spent quite a bit of time with her and asked me on the day to support them all to understand what was happening and to talk through the process. Later on that afternoon, when her family had left, I went back to check in on her, and she said the following thing to me, which really stuck with me. She said, "I've been married to my husband for 40 years, and what hurts me the most is that he couldn't bring himself to have this conversation with me." So I guess my take-home message is, regardless of your loved one's difficulties, our experience highlights the importance of having these conversations, being open and transparent, and preparing your loved ones as much as possible. Consider all the options that may be available to you. This may involve supporting your loved one to look at different facilities. Come in and meet our team at Montefiore. Have a look around our homes. At Montefiore, we're so fortunate to have a team of dedicated social workers and skilled and experienced staff who are really there to support you and your loved one through every step of the process. Talk about coming in on respite as an opportunity to see how you might like it with us. It can be really overwhelming to think that the move to residential care is permanent. So reassure your loved one that even if they progress on to permanent care, they can choose at any time to go home if they want to. So I just wanted to give you guys another example of a resident that stayed with us a while ago. She would always tell her family and friends when they visited her that she was with us on respite and that she could choose to go home at any time. This idea really provided her with great comfort and reassurance, and really helped her feel like it was her decision to stay with us for as long as she wanted to. Very often it's how we frame conversations. It's so important to help our loved ones feel that they can retain their independence and their decision-making capacity.
Thank you, Shelley. So as we heard now what you've just said, that is when we have a plan. And hopefully, you know, many of us, if we do have a plan, hopefully it will work out and we'll be able to follow the plan, like Melissa was saying for her pa, that they, the whole family were able to let him carry out his plan and to the best of their ability, and it was really important for them. But sometimes we have to navigate a situation when your loved one requires residential aged care following a crisis. So if they've had an incident, they've had to go into hospital, or even if they've had an incident at home, like a bad fall, or in the case of somebody who may have memory loss, have got lost on, you know, walked out the home and got lost. And you haven't really had the opportunity to adequately prepare or discuss this. So Shelley, could you give us some tips around that, please?
Sure. So unfortunately, a lot of our residents come in following an unexpected hospital admission, an injury, or during the time of a crisis. So I just wanted to share that we have an amazing admissions team that can really help you and your loved one through this process. So our admissions specialist will come out and meet you and your loved one in hospital or at home. This really gives us an opportunity to get to know you and for you and your loved one to ask us any questions and understand how we can help. Talk to your loved ones about a respite admission to really focus on their recovery, to help them regain their strength and to see how it goes, and just keep reassuring them that there's always an option to go home. Our website is a great resource. We have a lot of information, pictures and videos that you can show your loved one, take them through, to give them some information about who we are and what things might look like with us. It's also really important to share as much information about your loved one with us as possible. So knowing your loved one, their likes, dislikes, and routine will really help the team provide person-centered care. It's also a good idea to come in earlier before your loved one moves in. So you can come in and set their bedroom up with familiar items, photos, and memorabilia. All of our rooms have dedicated memory boxes outside that you can fill with items that are really important to them, that can help your loved ones identify their room and remind them a little bit of home. Spend time with your loved one on their admission day, stay for a meal with us, and support them to settle in. A lot of our residents are really encouraged to continue to engage in routines and activities that were important to them before they came in. So, for example, many of our residents continue to meet with their social groups outside of our home, attend Pilates, exercise classes, bridge clubs, go to courses, presentations. We even have residents who still volunteer at the Jewish Museum. So I guess just to wrap it up, really understanding and acknowledging that moving into residential care can be hard. It can be a process that's filled with grief and loss. It will be hard and it will take time to settle and adjust. And our team are really experienced and here to support you and your loved ones through this journey.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. And yeah, really, really useful tips, and especially about coming before and trying to set up the room with as familiar things as possible. So when somebody comes in, they feel a familiarity with things that they had at home. And also, for as long as they want to believe that they're on respite, let them believe it, because in actual fact, at any stage, even if you're a respite or a permanent resident, if you want to leave the facility, then you are able to do that. And that's an important thing for people to understand, so that they always feel that they have a choice if they want to make that choice. But what we do find often is that people come in, they settle in, they feel so comfortable and so secure in this environment that doesn't even become part of the discussion anymore. It becomes their home. So I think that, we've seen a lot of the common themes in answering these questions, and that is really having the big conversations at any stage, whether it's for home care, coming in for residential care, having a plan, and having the person as the center of the discussion, so they can have feel empowered and have input into what they want. But Melissa, I think that many people would have experienced or are currently experiencing the challenging position of being caught between being a spouse or a child versus a carer, being a carer. And we haven't really touched on that, and the the change of role that the person has to take. So can you give us some tips on recognizing the changing roles and how best to address this?
Absolutely. And I think, often when we become carers, we are so overwhelmed. There is so much on our plate. But a lot of the carers that I work with come to me because they're experiencing what they almost describe as like a living grief. They are yearning for the relationship that they once shared with this person that they love intensely and, whom they now care for. And I just wanted to share a couple of stories of carers that I've worked with. So one was a lady who I'm going to call Amy. And she came to me, and in our first session, through tears, she said, "I miss just being my mum's daughter. I miss being her daughter." She was caring for her mum who was living with dementia. And we spoke about, how to possibly address that. And in one of her mum's more lucid moments, I said to her, I wonder if your mum's also finding it hard that you're no longer just her daughter. Like, imagine waking up in the morning from her perspective on those more lucid days and knowing that this child that you have raised, that you have cared for your entire life, is now suddenly almost caring for it. And in Amy's words, parenting. She felt almost like a parent to her mum. And they had this conversation on one of her mum's better days. And she said it was so cathartic. They both cried. And her mum said to her, "Bubby, whatever the future holds, I am always your mother. Like, that doesn't change." And Amy said, like, in the hardest moments of caring for her mum, those words just resonated in her mind and gave her so much comfort and peace. And I think of another gentleman, David, who was caring for his partner, Nick, who was living with Parkinson's disease. And he came to me and he said, "You know, I really miss the intimacy that we shared, the physical intimacy." He said, "But I feel ridiculous even raising issues of like sex and intimacy when Nick is living with something so big and so heavy like Parkinson's." And again, I helped him, you know, to develop the language and the courage and the strategies to broach that conversation with Nick. And when they had the conversation, Nick said, "I've been feeling the same way. I feel like there's this, you know, big gap between us, but I didn't want to burden you because you're doing so much to care for me." And they ended up working actually with an occupational therapist who sort of specialized in intimacy. And so I think one of the big strategies there is that acknowledging the elephant in the room where possible, if your loved one is still able to engage in that conversation. It can be hard, but it can also be incredibly bonding because you're probably both grieving the same thing, the same changes. The other thing that you can do if your mum, dad, or loved one isn't able or willing to have that conversation is cultivate a sense of connection in other ways. So I think of Libby, who was caring for her dad. He had stage 4 lung cancer, and they used to always go to the opera house together to the symphony, just the two of them. And as her dad's cancer progressed, he was no longer able to go. So she would wheel him in his wheelchair down to a little park at the end of his road, and they'd have like a little picnic and listen to the ABC lunchtime concert. And she said, "Look, of course it's not the same. But when we're both sitting there and listening to the music and he reaches out and holds my hand," she said, "you know, I feel such a sense of connection to him." So I think we can still cultivate connection to the people we love, even if our previous ways of experiencing the relationship have changed. And just a final note, to also be kind and compassionate to yourself, that two things can be true at the same time. You can grieve and yearn for all that you've lost, while still possibly being grateful that this person you love is still here and you still love them. And, you know, both can be true at the same time.
Thanks, Melissa. Sharing those beautiful stories really gives us insight on how we could do things like that, and was very special to hear those. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all of your professional and insightful information that you've given us tonight. It's been wonderful. And so to finish off, what I'd like to ask for each one of you, just to give us a tip on what you think is the single best thing we can do as a family to set us up for success. So Mel?
I think everyone will know what I'm going to say. I think it is to talk about it. Talk about aging, have conversations, ideally as early as possible, but it's also never too late. And to empower yourself with resources to give you the courage, the confidence, the language to broach these conversations. There's a lot of support out there.
Thank you. And Shelley?
I guess for me, really understanding our loved ones' wishes and what they want for themselves and their care. We always want the best for our loved ones, but always consider what they would choose for themselves, not necessarily what we want for them.
Thanks. And last but not least, Amanda.
Thanks, Janine. I think the word that keeps coming up tonight is plan. You know, we've heard that over and over again, so that's really important. But I also believe it's important to listen to your loved one and involve them in every step of the process and ensure that you give them the choice and control around any decisions that are made.
Thank you. And I encourage people to use the chat line to ask questions because we do have some time now to just answer some questions. I have one that's come through and I'll put this to the panel. So the question is, do you have any tips or strategies when you live a long distance, interstate or overseas, from your loved one? I see you nodding, Melissa. Would you like some insight into that for us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to dive in. So I think this is a really good question because this is a very common scenario. A lot of us live far from our mum, dad, aging loved ones. And I guess really the importance of, I know you're going to think, oh my gosh, the conversations, but also putting future plans in place. It becomes even more imperative because your capacity to respond when things change, especially if they change rapidly or if there's a crisis, could be limited by the geographical distance. So some of the things to consider. The first is making sure that your loved one has a great GP. So starting to talk to them about, who is their family doctor? What is their relationship like with them? Maybe doing some research. Do you know any family, friends, neighbors that live near them that would be willing to, offer support and become part of mum and dad's sort of village if needed? And also thinking about some of the legal documentation to support their care wishes. So these are things like an advanced care directive, and as Janine spoke about earlier, legally appointing substitute decision makers like an enduring guardian, an enduring power of attorney. But I think really you're wanting to understand mum and dad's wishes and almost help to set up a village where they are, even if it just buys you time to get yourself there when needed.
Thanks, Melissa. Can I please just remind everyone that you need to use the chat function. So you need to type in your question. We see somebody's raised their hand, but we actually need, if you can, to please use the chat function to type in the question. Thank you. So just picking up again, like on what Melissa was saying, sometimes it's valuable if you do live overseas or far away, and if you are able to have your plan and have those discussions with your loved one well in advance, to actually visit aged care facilities long before you even need them. Go in and look at them, go in with your loved one and say, well, if the time ever comes, where would you like to live? Go look at these facilities. And because I know from somebody that I, personally know who's living with dementia and is still not at a stage of coming in, they have gone with their spouse to look and say, in the event that I have to come in, I want to go to Montefiore. And they have looked at other places and they have, looked around, and the person then feels that they have got some control over their decision. And your loved one can also be really comforted to know that when the time comes, and it's really hard that day to put your loved one into a residential aged care facility or, into care, that that this is where they wanted to be, and that at least could give you some sort of comfort. Shelley or Amanda, have you got any tips on that?
I might just jump in if that's okay, Janine. We have got a considerably high amount of clients that we support where their loved ones are living overseas or living interstate. And I think key for success is for the family to do their due diligence. If you're looking at home care, and I'll talk to that specifically, do your homework. talk to as many home care providers as possible. Look at costs, look at the way that they engage with their carers. Build a relationship, a really strong relationship, so that I think trust is the main thing. You've got to be comfortable with whoever you engage with to look after your mother, your father, your loved one. And when we have got a dedicated care coordinator looking after that loved one because you're not there, you just physically can't be there, the lines of communication are open with our care coordinators and the loved ones, whether it's up to date, reports on how, mum, dad or loved one is going, scheduled informal and formal catch-ups to see how the care and the support is going within the home. But our consumers are savvy these days, and they really do shop around. So I do strongly recommend, do your homework, do your due diligence, but most importantly, just be comfortable and when you are engaging with any sort of provider, whether it be residential or home care, because you've got to feel comfortable, handing over your loved one for the ongoing care and support, because it's a big decision.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so we have one more question that we'll take before we end tonight's webinar. The question is, and I'll just read straight from what they've asked. The discussion has been most enlightening and caring. However, I have found the reality rather different. While the professionals involved who I speak with along the way, I am finding there is so much red tape, so much time involved in each stage, and so many computer issues and jargon that need to be negotiated. Can you provide some tips on cutting through the time when things become urgent suddenly? So I'll open it up to the panel. Who would like to answer?
I think for me, Janine, really understanding who's in the care team supporting your loved one and who to speak to for what. I think our social workers are often really good at helping our families to navigate that. So, the day that you come in with your loved one, our social worker will spend time with you, give you a list of who to contact in the unit. You will have a telephone number for them. You can always call them directly, and they can do some of that chasing for you, following up with different team members. There can be a lot of red tape, and we can get very used to speaking with our acronyms. So it's okay to ask us to slow down and to explain things more clearly. But having one sort of central contact person can help navigate some of that.
Yeah, and look, I do know, the aged care, the website that you have to go on and make your applications. It is challenging, very challenging to say the least. And that's why also when we say plan and get all these things done when you've got the time. And the question is like when it happens urgently. So Montefiore, our admissions team, I know, they will sit with people and help navigate through the application, even through an application for an aged care assessment. They are here to help in our admissions team with all of that and to try and get through the red tape as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, getting a package or getting into or getting a bed in aged care can sometimes be a wait. But then that's when we would say, access our home care in the interim, access the opportunity to maybe get somebody looked after at home until such time as there is a bed in the facility. Or if it is something that's going to be a long-term thing, staying at home, our help at home team, as Amanda has said, will help you through that journey. So again, what I'm saying is Monty is here as a resource for you all at any time. So please understand that we're not just about, okay, phoning and wanting to get you into a bed, or speaking to home care and wanting to get you, help at home. We have teams that can help navigate through systems, can put you in touch with the right people who need to help you with other different aspects. If you need to look at financial aspects, all of those things, we're able to guide you in that journey. And what Montefiore wants to do is make that journey as smooth as possible from the moment somebody starts on their aged care journey. So, we offer the whole gamut of services, from our daycare services to our help at home, to respite, and to our M offering now for the independent living and residential aged care. And we can guide you through the whole process and give you the full gamut of services. That's what our team are here for.
Janine, I hope you don't mind me. I'll hop in for 30 seconds. I just saw that the same person who asked the question said, how do I contact a social worker? And I know, Shelley, you've said that if their loved one is a resident here at Montefiore, they can contact a social worker on staff. Amanda, I think you mentioned that even if you're a member of the community, that you can call up to Monty Help at Home, even if perhaps you're not yet ready, Janine, as you said, to engage carers and in home care, just to get help in navigating the aged care system. A lot of my clients call it the aged care maze. I just wanted to add to that by saying, if you have a GP who's really familiar with working with older adults, or if you have a geriatrician, you can ask them also for a recommendation for a social worker who specializes in aged care. And especially if you have specialists that are in a hospital affiliated with a public hospital, often they have multidisciplinary teams, and they will have a social worker within their team who specializes in older people and aged care as well, just depending on where you're at in your journey.
Thanks, Melissa. That's very useful. So I'd like to thank Melissa, Shelley, and Amanda. I'm sure you will all agree that we've had a very valuable discussion with some great practical tips managing the aged care journey. And thank you all of you for giving up your time to share your professional and invaluable knowledge with us. You can also purchase Melissa's book, We Need to Talk About Aging, which you can order online. It's a comprehensive guide that will empower your family to navigate the aging journey with confidence and hope. We will be sending a recording of this seminar to all of you via email, and we'll also share contact numbers and further information, as well as Melissa's link to get those tips. We'll be giving you information on Montefiore Help at Home and residential care, and who the contacts for next steps should be if your family need it. So thank you again for watching, and see you at our next Spotlight event in the coming months. Good night, everyone, and thank you.